So in this video, we will see about field triggers and object triggers in Oracle Fusion Cloud Groovy. So, so to trigger any backend logic or after saving a record or after changing a particular field, if we want to run some Groovy and then if we want to do some action, so synchronously, immediately, so then we will consider field triggers. Okay, so in triggers, we have two different types. So one is field trigger and the another one is object trigger. So when we change a particular field value, so then if you want to run the code and then do some action, so then it will be called that trigger that particular event is called like field trigger. So basically we can say after field is changed, so the event type will be after field value changed. And then the another type is when a record is saving. Okay, so not only on save, it can be anything. So at object level, at record level, if something is if something is happening, means either it can be create event or update or delete or anything like this. So any event at object level, so then we'll use object triggers. Okay, so where we can write this Groovy or object triggers is by going into application composer. If we go to application composer and then a particular object, and then if we expand the server scripts, so we can find after validation rules, we have triggers. In validation rules also, we have field triggers and object triggers, field validations, field rules and object rules. Similarly, in triggers also, we have field triggers and as well as object triggers. So if we see object triggers, so we can find different trigger events. So after create, before invalidate, before remove, before insert, before update, before delete, before rollback, right? After changes posted in database. So if we observe, all of these events are at object record level. Okay, so when we create some record, so or when we remove some record, okay, when we insert a particular record into database, so that time we can trigger this, but we can select this particular event, and whatever the logic, right, the Groovy code we will write here in edit script. So whenever this trigger point is met, then the code will run and then it will execute some actions. So the actions, we can use, we can throw some error message, or we can set attributes, okay, and we can use Groovy to call web service, whatever logics that we can perform in Groovy, all we can do in this particular trigger point. So this is object trigger. So we'll take one scenario and then we'll execute same on a field trigger and how it works, and then how it works in object trigger. So field triggers are nothing but when, so we need to select a particular field. So on field change it, Okay, so whatever field we have selected, so if that field value changed, then it will trigger, and then whatever code here we will put, the same code will run. So when this field is changed. Okay, so now we'll take one scenario, and then we'll write a Groovy. We'll go to contact object. Okay, so the scenario here is age calculation. So we in contact we have date of birth field. So here we will enter the date of birth of the contact, right? So now I want to calculate the age based on the date of birth. So here suppose if I say so this is my date of birth, and on selecting date of birth, immediately I want to calculate age, and I need to see that value here. Okay, so that is our requirement. So this can be achieved through using field trigger, and using object trigger. Once we save record, okay, after entering date of birth, and then if we save, then if we want to see the age, so then that can be achieved through object trigger. So first we'll see field using field trigger, how it works, and then we'll move the same script to object level, and then we'll see the difference. Okay. To configure again, we'll go back to application composer and contact object and field trigger. Here we need to select based on the field, right? Field change. And what is that field? Is date of birth. So date of birth is changed. So then we need to write. Okay. So now we need to write the script here. So the how we'll calculate the age means we need to take the date of birth field, and also we need to consider the current date, and we need to take the difference. So the logic will be like this. So if date of birth value is available, so this is the API name for date of birth. This is the out of the box field, and age underscore C is a custom field. So if date of birth is available, then we'll take the days, we'll calculate the days, like today dot get time. This is in milliseconds. We are taking current date in milliseconds and date of birth again into milliseconds, and we are getting the difference in milliseconds, and that milliseconds we are converting to days. So divided by 1000 will give in seconds, and again in minutes, again in hours, and then in days. So finally we'll get the days here, and that days we are dividing with year 365 to get the number of years, and that number of years we are rounding off, and then we are setting it to age underscore C. If there is no date of birth entered, then we are defaulting the value to 0. Okay. So, and the error message is if something fails, right? So it will it will throw this message. So that's all. Here we can use function palette, same like validation rules. Okay, and then all other supported functions, related objects, child objects, all we can use into our script area. So now we are considering this scenario. So for us, this is okay. Now I'll save and close. Now I'll go back to the contact screens. So we will change the date of birth from 2022, okay, 2000. So we could see the age is calculated through the script and it is set to age field. So now if we change again, so immediately the calculation will run, and then it will set the value to age field. So so when we change some value, right? Suppose so then immediately the script will calculate, and then if we remove this value, and then if we try to save, then it won't re-evaluate. Script will not run. Script will run whenever we change the field value. So only that time it will run and it will calculate and then it will set. So the same field trigger we can use as a validation or as a field validation rule as well. So how we can use is we can, instead of using set attribute, so we can use error message called throw new JBO exception, and then we can just use the same way. So we'll see the differences. Uh, so in next session, but we can throw error messages using field triggers as well. So now we will move the same code to object triggers, and we'll see what changes we need to do. Now I'll comment it. I'll create an object trigger of type before update. And here, so we don't want to calculate all the time. So whenever date of birth is changed, only that time we need to trigger this particular code. So for that, we have a built-in function where we can check the attribute change. So we have a function called isAttributeChanged. So using this option, so we could detect whether the field is changed or not. So like this. So we are evaluating whether date of birth field is changed or not, and if date of birth is available. Okay. If date of birth is available and if it is changed, so then we are triggering this particular code. Else uh, we are keeping it 0. Here we'll say if else if date of birth if it is null, then we'll set it to 0. Else it will calculate this. So if we use field trigger, then we don't need this condition, because the field trigger is nothing but isAttributeChanged of that field. Okay, that's why we won't consider this condition in field trigger, and when it comes to object trigger, we need to include. Okay, so with the same name, we have another one. So we'll change script validated, save and close. So now again, we'll go back to the now we'll remove age and we'll change the age. Okay, now if we observe, so after changing, immediately the age is not calculated, right? Because we have commented the field trigger code, and then we move to object trigger. Now when age will calculate is when we click on save or save and close. Okay, and even now if we remove, it won't calculate because date is not changed. So only date is changed, then it will trigger. Okay. So the same code, if we place on create, then the same code will trigger on creating a new record. If we want to if you want this script to run on deleting contact, so then it will, if you use delete trigger, so then it will work on that. And then the exact difference, if we want to see, uh, yeah. So when after trigger will work is when a new instance of object is created, means when new record is created. So then we can use this after create object trigger. Okay, so usually this can be used to default while creating a new record. If you want to default some values, so we can use this particular trigger. And before invalidate, so uh, so so this can be if a child is created or removed or modified, right? So then in the parent, so we can detect that change. So if a child is child records are changing, means child records creating or updating, deleting. So then the same event we can detect in parent object using before invalidate trigger. Okay. And before remove, if we attempt removing, means if we click on the cross mark, right? So then before remove will trigger. It stops deleting. So it can evaluate like before deleting. So this before remove will work, and it will check if there is any validations, uh, and then it will delete if this passes. If before remove passes, so then only it will delete in the database. So before insert in the database, so if we are creating a new record, so then it so before getting into the database, so if you want to perform some logics, and then so then we can use this before insert, and same way before update and before delete. So when a record is deleted from the database, then if you want to perform some actions, then we can use before delete. Before remove, it's the it is before deleting the record from the database. But here, so it's even before deleting. So first before remove trigger, and then we can say before delete in database. So this will trigger first, and then before delete in database. After changes posted, so after creating a record or after updating a record, then all the changes will post to the data, will post to database. And then if you want to perform some uh, logics, so then we can use this trigger. Basically, this trigger can we use it to call any REST services, web services. Then we can consider this after changes posted to database trigger. So before commit, so any pending changes if you want to detect, so we can use. But mostly before commit, we won't use. The most used triggers are after create, before remove, before insert, before update, after changes posted to database. So remaining all we won't use frequently, but it can be again depending on the scenario. So now we'll see the differences between validation rules and triggers. So when we come to validation rules are specifically given to throw some error message when some particular condition is met. Okay, so that validation message will use in the error message content. Okay, here we can't use set attributes, we can't perform some logics, we can't call web services. Okay, so we can call web services also, but the final result should be written true or false. If it is written false, then it is then we are, the meaning is we are throwing the error, and if it is written true, then we are not throwing this error. So we can use anything in the script area, but we should not set, okay, we should not use this to set some logics to run a heavy logics. And after evaluating, we need to just return true or false based on the evaluation. Okay. So then coming to triggers, so here we can write, okay, we can write some logic, and then based on that, we may choose, we may write a validation message like using this throw message. So we can throw some message like uh, if age equal to 0, or if age is less than uh, 0, then we can throw something like this. Okay, something like this. So here what will happen is, so first it will evaluate this logic, and based on that we can throw error also. If it doesn't meet this condition, then it will work. And here this error message will trigger only if we throw some null. The use case for this error message is like if you want to throw some warning messages. Okay, and if it is a object trigger, right, so we can use this error message content, uh, okay, for in warning message area. And then if we write this adf dot error dot warn of null, so then whatever warning message we wanted to throw, so this particular error message will be displayed in the UI. So this is how we can use error message. And also in some cases when the validation fails, so just it can throw this error message. So overall, so triggers can be used for both purposes, to throw validations and to run the backend logic. But validation rules can be used only to throw error messages or warning messages. That's all. Also, if we use validation rules, so if you want to place the dynamic content here, like using some fields in the error message, so that is not possible using this error message. So in that scenario, we can use this same same throw error message. Okay, so here we can include the fields, and so whatever dynamic content we can use in this function, and then we can throw this message to the UI. But in the error message, whatever content we use, it will be the static content. So if you want the dynamic content, either we need to manage using throw message, or we can use the field, the triggers.